The Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew, the 17th chapter. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became bright as light. Suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with them. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will set up 3 tents here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." And while he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my son, the beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Get up and do not be afraid." And when they raised their eyes, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them, "Tell no one about the vision until after the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." This is the gospel of the Lord. Please be seated. Grace, peace, and mercy are yours from the triune God. Amen. When Tamara and I were first married, we were living in Duluth, Minnesota. And some week, as kind of a spur-of-the-moment trip, a few friends and us decided to go into the Boundary Waters canoe area on a little weekend trip. Who's been to the Boundary Waters or heard of the Boundary Waters? Yeah, the Boundary Waters. Where's that? So the Boundary Waters are just a few hours north of Duluth, and it's essentially kind of a national park that butts right up against a Canadian national park called the Quetico. And both of these parks prohibit motors of any kind in the parks. There are no roads, there are no electricities, you don't reserve campsites, you just go and look for a site, following maps and things. There's no cell phones. It is just the woods and a lot of lakes and rivers, and you can disappear for weeks up there and go days without seeing anyone if you're lucky enough and go far enough in. And the only way to get around, like I said, is by canoes or kayaks if you prefer, but most people use canoes because you can carry more stuff. In this particular trip, it was the fall, September, October, but the weather was good and it wasn't too cold yet. And we were all experienced people in the Boundary Waters, so the 6 of us decided on a Wednesday to put in to enter the Boundary Waters, that is. And the next night, after we got off work, we got all of our gear together, got our canoes on top of our cars, and drove a few hours, and we were launching in the water at like 9 or 10 at night. So it's dark. In hopes that we could find a site, and willing to paddle in portage as long as we needed to, because sometimes people get to sites closer to you and you have to keep on paddling, right? And again, great weather, no wind. The lake was absolutely glass. And it was silent. And nothing but our paddles were dipping into the water. It's the only sound we could hear. And about an hour into our paddle, one of my friends noticed a weird light. And then another one. And another. And pretty soon the sky was dancing with the northern lights. Colors I had never seen before. The sort of northern lights that would appear on a screensaver. Reds, pinks, oranges, lime greens, moving around in silence, twisting and turning and flashing in the air and reflecting in perfect mimicry on the glassy, watery surface in front of us and all around us. There were no lights, no video. Someone might have tried to capture it with their phone, like Peter trying to capture the moment in our story, but it was too holy. It didn't work. And so we just paddled through the colors and the cool fall air with no other canoes in sight, not able to hear anyone else, slack-jawed, quiet and gasping at what was happening all around us. And even now, I am sure I am not describing it with any sense of how grand this was. It was holy, sacred, drenched in God's glory. And it remains to this day one of the moments I carry with me as a sign of God's presence. If the world is heavy, if it all seems too much, if I find myself in rhythms of dread, sometimes I remind myself of this night or nights like this, and I hear my paddle pushing swirls of reflecting light and feel the cool, crisp night on my face and imagine what the lights were like. And this experience lights my way. It lifts a little bit of the burden for me. And I think that's what the Transfiguration is for. The story today in our text. I think it's a wholly indescribable experience. I think it's one of these moments that God's presence is undeniable, that becomes a holdfast of faith for people when the world seems slippery and chaotic. It's a light in the dark to guide our way. This story today comes right after Jesus lets the disciples in on his plans. He says he is on his way to Jerusalem. It's the text that comes right before this. He says that he's going to be killed, that he will suffer and die and be crucified, but that he has to go, and he tells them that he is going to rise again. Of course, the disciples tell him not to go, to leave the path and make a different one instead. It's where Jesus famously silences Peter by calling him a Satan and telling him to get behind him. That's what happens the day before Jesus goes up the mountain with Peter, James, and John. That's the context. That's the turn in the narrative where they start going to Jerusalem. And when he goes down the mountain, he is entering the valley of death, and the disciples are to go with them. But this holy and terrifying things that the disciples encounter on the mountain, it remains a marker on their journey. Like the stones that Jacob, Sarah, and Hagar set up on their journeys in the wilderness, this is holy ground and a place to remember. It's an intersection of heaven and earth to remind them of something good. And of course, one could ask, how do you forget something like that? How is this Peter the same guy that denies Jesus 3 times? How are James and John the same people that fall asleep in the garden? How are these the guys that hide in the room with the blinds pulled shut after Jesus is executed? How are they not tailgating the tomb waiting for the stone to be rolled away? How are they not getting the party balloons ready and making a feast? How are they not faithfully preparing and standing by Jesus the whole time after this? After seeing God that clearly on the mountain, after hearing the voice in the clouds and the dazzling blast of light and colors, after seeing Jesus commune with Moses and Elijah, the saints and embodiment of the law and gospel, how could you forget this? It's a great question. But we do this. We do it all the time. We've encountered God. We are forgetful people. If the story of the disciples are not enough, just look at the people in Exodus. After 500 years of enslavement, the strong arm of God pulls them out of their misery and liberates them to a new life. And there are stories of locusts and hail and frogs and rivers of blood. There are angels and the splitting of the Red Sea for people to walk across dry land. There is a pillar of smoke and fire leading them on the way. And yes, I know our story is Moses up on the mountain and his appearance changes and becomes dazzling and he receives the law in the transformational way for Israel to exist in the world. But he comes down the mountain after like a month up there. And these same people who experienced all of these things, all of God's deliverance, they forgot all of that wild stuff. All of that terrifying freedom is a past thing. They just forgot. And the next thing you know, they are making an idol and finding something else to worship. And boy, when somebody brought that up in the Bible study last week, I just lost my mind. It's amazing. Because we do this. Like I said, I do this. I certainly haven't lived perfectly since my night in the Boundary Waters, right? Forget God all the time. We do this, don't we? We have stories of God's presence too. Maybe not as big as Peter's, James, and John's. Maybe there aren't swarms of locusts and walking through bodies of water on dry land, but there are parties of friends and family where you stand in a doorway and look at the people you travel life with and just cherish. There are car rides where you see the sun coming up over the horizon. There are worship services where it feels like somebody picked a hymn just for you. There are births of childs and reconciliations with friends, a phone call when you needed it so badly. There are times where God shows up tangibly in our life and you can feel the holiness. These things happen. They do. They are powerful. They are important touchstones of our faith for us to cling to and cherish, because indeed the way is not easy and we humans are so quick to forget. However, when we do learn to remember these holy moments, we can look for these lights on our way. We can find God. We can be reassured of God's presence even when it's hard. Today after worship, we will bury our Alleluia banner. This Ash Wednesday, we celebrate our humanness and enter into Lent with the disciples of Jesus, and remember that we're not so different from the people walking around the wilderness with Moses or the people up on the mountain with Jesus, and we descend the mountain of this transfiguration and journey to the cross together all the way through this Lenten season. And it will be a beautiful journey. But take heart. We have these stories, these intersections of sacredness in our lives. We have these lights to guide our way. God has not forsaken us and never will. The tomb's dark seal is temporary. Life bursts forth. Amen. Well of Hope is an inclusive community of faith in the ELCA. We proclaim God's love for all. We create community through worship, study, and play, and we serve in love. If you want to be a part of this, sign up for our weekly email online here. Follow us on our social media or stop by worship at 10 o'clock at New Hope Presbyterian Church. Go through the big wooden doors on the right. We look forward to seeing you.